Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing, hello. Testing, hello. Good evening. We're going to give this one more test. Testing 1, 2, 3. Successful. All right.
All right. Good evening. Apologize for the delay. I will call the Tuesday, July 23rd, Timnath Town Council meeting to order. Ms. Peters Garcia, will you please take the roll?
Yes. Mayor Robert Oxmacher,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Luke Wagner,
Here.
Councilmember Jeremy Holt,
Here.
Councilmember Lisa Lake. Here. Councilmember Bill Jenkins.
All right. Item number 2, amendments to the agenda. I understand from town staff that there is no longer a need for agenda item 8A, the executive session. Is that correct? Okay. Well, if there's no objection, then we will remove the last business item from the agenda. Now it is time for public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for anyone who wishes to speak on an item that doesn't otherwise have comment opportunity on the agenda. I understand no one has signed up. Is that correct? Does anyone wish to speak but didn't get the chance to sign up? All right. Then we will move on to item number 4, the consent agenda. We have 2 items today. 4A is approval of the July 9th, 2024 council meeting minutes. 4B is the July 12th, 2024 check register. At this time, is there any request to remove an item from the consent agenda? Seeing no request, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as read signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda passes 4-0. Move on to item 5, reports. Council, anything to share?
I just have one quick item. I just recently finalized the date for my next council chat. So that will be held on August 2nd, which is next Friday, I believe. I don't have my calendar right there in front of me, but August 2nd from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. at the Hidden STEM. So if anyone is interested in sharing any ideas, suggestions, any kind of feedback, thank you to the Hidden STEM for hosting and allowing me to use some of their space for community members to come and talk to me.
All right. Thank you, and thank you for doing that. I think we have different council members set up for every month going forward for the rest of the year, so good shape there. Councilman Holt, anything to share?
Nope, nothing new at this time.
Mayor Pro Tem? Just have one item, which is August 9th. We have movie night at Community Park. It's the Super Mario Brothers movie. So hope to see everyone out there. We have fun happening before the movie, and I think the movie gets rolling at 8:30. Is that right? Does anyone know? I think that's the plan. All right. Anything else to share? All right. We move on to staff reports. Scagliardi, anything other than what's in your finance report? Thank you. Director Stone, anything from Public Works?
Yes, just this afternoon, we got some good news. I'll let Kim go ahead and share with you regarding the Timnath Parkway project and the railroad.
Hello. We have reached a good conclusion with the railroad, and we are awaiting a notary signature, which is going to get sent to Aaron tomorrow morning. So we have reached that agreement.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know that has been a lot to get through, so hopefully no more stumbling blocks there. Director Stone, anything else? Right. And I did just want to pass along my thanks. I know that the speed limit officially got changed on River Pass west of 3 Bell. So thank you to you and the staff that made that happen. Community Development, Director Robinson.
I do have two updates. I'm very happy to announce a promotion and a new staff member. First, I'd like to introduce Jay Baker. He's our planner. He comes from us via Pueblo, and interestingly enough, tonight we did mention a metro district, which Jay actually used to work for back in the day down in Pueblo, but I'm very excited to have Jay as part of our team. Just wanted to have an opportunity to introduce him. You did get a little bio that was sent out about Jay, but again, I'm very happy to have him. The second announcement, through a national search trying to replace Kevin Cobell, I'm very happy to announce that Logan Graves was very successful in accepting the promotion for principal planner. So we didn't actually have to look very far, but it was a national search and we had very good candidates for that. So congratulations to Logan with that. So other than that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Congratulations to both of you. Welcome to the team. And Ms. Graves, congratulations. Council, anything for Director Robinson? All right, and then finally, Police, Chief Jones. We're still 24/7? Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. All right. That concludes our staff reports, and now on to regular business. We have item 6A. I'd like to welcome County Commissioner Stevens to tell us a little bit about the Colorado State University Extension partnership with Larimer County. I think there is a button.
I'm not as familiar with being on this side of the dais, so. Well, thank you so much for hosting us this evening. I'm Kristen Stevens, Larimer County Commissioner. Happy to be here. I also serve as the liaison to the Extension Board, and I have with me Carrie Weiner, who's our Extension Director. And Carrie's here to talk to you a little bit about what Extension does. So a lot of people are familiar with 4-H, but Extension offers a myriad of programs across the county, and we're here tonight to kind of tell you about some of those programs and see what programs might fit into your community, how we can help you, and just really introduce all the programs that are offered by Extension. We sometimes say that Extension is our best hidden secret, and we don't want it to be a secret because we really want people to take advantage of the great things that Extension does. So I know we don't have a ton of time, so without further ado, I'll announce Kerry Weiner. He'll be able to present to you and then answer any questions that you might have. But thank you again for hosting us tonight.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Town Council, for having us. As the Commissioner said, I'm the Director of the Larimer County Extension Office, and our mission is to provide educational programming throughout the county according to what the community needs. And so we're going to some different towns and doing this presentation to try to better understand what it is that you want. And before that, it's my job to try to inform you a little bit if you don't know about Extension. We've been around for 100 years. It's a partnership between the university and the state and the federal government. So it's a cooperative agreement that we have together to try to bring research-based information to citizens. And so this is a reference for you if you would like to use it while I give you a little tour. We have 7 main program areas, and one of them that's one of our well-known areas is 4-H. That's our youth development program to help kids develop life skills and leadership skills. We also have a new addition to that program called Juntos, which means together in Spanish. And that's an effort to work with Latino, Spanish-speaking youth and their families to increase high school graduation rates and to help them prepare for college and career. In the realm of food safety, we do work at both the home level and the retail level. So we help people understand how to can and preserve food, and we do some work on nutrition education. And then on the retail food safety, we also do certifications for restaurant and food establishment employees and try to give them workforce development related skills. We do run the Larimer County Farmers Market, which is in Old Town, Fort Collins. And so welcome anyone to come join us every Saturday while the market's open. When it comes to health and well-being, we do some programming around that as well. We have a website called Senior Access Points, which is intended to be more of a one-stop shop for older adults and their caregivers to be able to navigate some of the resources that are available. We have been doing some planning, some advanced care planning support. We've also been giving away radon test kits through funding available through the state of Colorado, and we look forward to being able to continue to do that in the coming year. We have a long history in agriculture. I know there's still some farms in this area. So we have an ag and natural resources specialist who works with ag producers to ensure that they are profitable and sustainable. She also does small acreage site visits. I imagine there are some small acreages in this area. So if you have weeds or questions about pasture management or livestock and grazing, she's a great resource and is able to come out and make those kinds of visits. One of our other more popular programs is the Master Gardener program. I'm not sure if we have any Master Gardeners here tonight, but these are volunteers. We have over 100 Master Gardener volunteers throughout the county who can answer questions about yard and garden, pests, insects, how to grow tomatoes, how to grow flowers, and how to grow grass. And so they're heavily utilized in our office. And then on the back page, we also do work in community development. Our flagship program there is called the Family Leadership Training Institute, where we provide training to traditionally underrepresented individuals to try to give them the skills that they need to advocate for themselves and to be involved at a civic level. So that's a very brief overview of the kinds of programs that we offer. Again, it's all intended to bring research-based information in these different areas to the community. And my hope would be that, any one of you might have some ideas about what would be valued in Timnath and what you might see as priorities so that we can make sure that we're serving the residents of Timnath.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing that information with us. If we or community members want more information, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so I mean, if you all, feel free to just use the resources on this report. We have an email address on there. If you have thoughts about, what you'd like to see in Timnath, you're welcome to contact me via email, carrie.weiner@colostate.edu. And so either one of those options would be great. So.
Very good. Thank you. Looks like larimerextension.org.
larimerextension.org, that's our website. You can learn more about our programs that way. And yeah, would love to hear about your ideas for what's important here. So, Commissioner, did you want to?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for listening to some of the things that Carrie was talking about. I think that there's really great programming. I know when we went up to Estes Park a few weeks ago, a lot of folks were interested in the work that we do with older adults, advanced care planning and some of that. So that's really great. So, if there's opportunities for us to do workshops here in town or just to introduce people to some of the programs that we offer, we'd be happy to do that as well. And so, yeah, I mean, Juntos is another great program that Carrie was talking about that really to increase, the graduation rates of Hispanic youth in our community. I know that we'll be moving into Loveland with that programming, and Estes Park was certainly interested in that as well. So, yeah, just be in touch with us. Let us know because, not only do we offer those programs, but we also want to be responsive. So if there's spaces where we could do other kinds of programming, I know we've done some programming with youth around social media and mental health issues. And so if you can think of anything that's not on that sheet, that, a space that you feel like we could be helpful, please be in touch with us. But just wanted to just share that and know that Extension is more than 4-H and we're here to serve you. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Director Weimer. We appreciate it. All right, moving on to business item 6B, Resolution 55, Series 2024, a resolution approving the First Amendment to the Public Finance Agreement for the Ladera property. Ms. Steffel.
Thank you. So you have before you a proposed First Amendment to the Public Finance Agreement for the Ladera subdivision. And first of all, let me just give you a quick refresher of what the original purpose of the original agreement was. You have the original agreement as part of your council packet. And what this did is it allowed in conjunction with an ordinance, provided a sales tax credit for commercial development within the Ladera subdivision, phase 1, if half of the sales tax that would be imposed upon the properties, and in exchange required the developer to record a credit PIF covenant upon the property, and so for half of the sales tax rate, so that the same rate would be paid as would be normally paid for a sales tax, except that half of the revenue would come to the town and half of the revenue would be reimbursed for covering the costs of public improvements. This is a kind of administrative cleanup amendment because we now know more information about what the location is going to be of the commercial development. And so what it does is it just changes the Exhibit A to the original agreement that defined the property upon which the credit PIF covenant would be imposed upon which the sales tax credit would be provided and removes Wetzel Street from, because it's now dedicated right of way, so it doesn't need to be subject to the covenant. And then it adds in about 3.123 acres. And basically this allows the entire buildings that are expected to be developed to be all within here. So if they built one commercial building, well, according to their current design plans, it would be kind of half within the covenant and half, and a little sliver would be outside. So this just basically realigns that original Exhibit A to be consistent with what we expect the final property layout is going to be in the final development layout. And I know that the attorney for the developer is here, Carolyn White, to answer any additional questions, but that is the purpose of this amendment.
Thank you, Ms. White. Welcome. Good to see you as always. Anything to add? Council, what questions do we have? Mayor Pro Tem.
So Carolyn, the 3 acres, so this moves something maybe that was in phase 2 to phase 1. Is that the 3 acres? Is that where we're moving it, or is it just purely boundaries?
It is property that was included in the second annexation for those 3 acres that are now going to be within phase 1 of the development.
If I may, Mayor, Councilmember, the way we think of it, sort of, we annex phase 1, we annex phase 2. Now to us, it's all one big development, right? And in laying out the buildings of the new development, we have one building that is 90% in phase 1 with a little bit that's hanging out in phase 2. And because the legal description of the agreement for the credit PIF, excludes that little strip of building, I think we would all have a dickens of a time trying to figure out whether every sales tax dollar was collected north of the line or south of the line. And so we proposed to the city that we ought to amend the legal description. We're not putting all of phase 2 in there. We're not trying to capture additional revenue. The cap remains the same. The purpose that we spent it on, which was Weitzel Street, remains the same. It's just, we have this one building now that we've combined the 2 projects into one that hangs over the line. And we thought it would be much easier for us both to administer if we change the legal description for the underlying agreement.
Okay, that was going to be my second question. There's no material difference between phase 1 or phase 2?
Well, most of phase 2 is not included in the credit PIF. It is only this 3 acres that will be added to the credit PIF. The rest of it is not subject to the credit PIF.
Right.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Council, other questions? So phase 1, lot 4, what will happen? How does this additional 3 acres get added to that lot procedurally? When does that happen? And
You mean in terms of like the entitlements, the subdivision, the platting?
Yeah.
I think that's in process, right? Yeah, I think we've already submitted that and it's in process.
Okay. But the intent is for that essentially lot 4 to get bigger and for that to be one single tenant as opposed to multiple tenants
Indeed.
in this new thing. Okay.
Exactly right.
And then Carolyn, our agreement is for 10 years and regardless of whether we did this or not, if we took on the challenge of collecting 90% of the tax revenue from that establishment or whatever, regardless, this is still capped at whichever occurs first, 10 years or $5 million being reimbursed. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the credit, and it's not quite a reimbursement, but the credit PIF total amount that would be collected would be a maximum of $5 million.
Okay. And this doesn't amend the original 10-year date. That goes back to the original 2021 when we entered into this originally?
That's correct.
Okay. Questions? Okay. All right. If there's nothing else to discuss there at this time, I would entertain a motion to approve Resolution 55 Series 2024, a resolution approving the First Amendment to the Public Finance Agreement for the Ladera property.
I motion to approve Resolution number 55, Series 2024, resolution approving the First Amendment to the Public Finance Agreement, Ladera property.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Lake, council discussion.
I would just say administratively, I think this makes sense. I'm in support of it.
It does make sense. I was initially a little bit concerned that, this would apply to the entire Ladera development, 240 roughly acres. But that's not the intent here. I agree that with Ms. White that trying to, portion that out would be difficult. It sounds like it's just one tenant. They're not, as I understand it, trying to sneak in an additional tenant under these terms or I suppose it's not a tenant. You're going to sell them the property, right? But so I think it makes sense. Any other commentary?
I would echo that. I would, appreciate the consolidation on the administrative side, and just the willingness to get this done the right way to get that taken care of. So kudos to all.
All right. Very well. Have been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor of approving Resolution 55, Series 2024, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It carries 4-0. Moving on to item 6C, Resolution 56, Series 2024, a resolution approving the contract with JUB Engineers Incorporated for the County Road 5 Bridge and Widening Project. Ms. Koivu Niemi, did I get anywhere close? Okay.
Good evening, council members. My name is Kim Koivanemi. I'm a senior civil engineer with the town of Timnath. Today we have a presentation outlining the County Road 5 Bridge and Widening Project. We wanted to start with a project overview of the project. This is to design and construct a 4-lane arterial roadway from Weitzel Street to Deer Park / Cornhusk Avenue. This project is going to replace and widen the existing bridge over the Cache-la-Poudre River and realign the County Road 5 and Harmony Road intersection to tie into the ultimate location of Timnath Parkway. This project was identified in the 2024 CIP and Transportation Master Plan and aligns with our goals to enhance safety, improve traffic flow, and support multimodal connectivity, and also support the infrastructure that we need for our growing community. On the next page here, we do have a map of that project area. On the far left of the screen is Weitzel. These are the limits of the project shown in blue. That is the area that we will be designing. Can zoom in on a separate PDF if we need to. Further to the north, we continue. That's Harmony Road there, and I apologize again, it's kind of small. That's Harmony Road intersection that's being pointed at right there. You can see that the project kind of shifts that road further to the east. That's to align with the existing bridge and then ties into Timnath Parkway. That shading that's shown through there, that's Timnath Parkway that's currently under construction, and that's what we'll be tying into at Deer Park and Cornhusk Avenue. So ultimately, County Road 5 will tie to there. As far as typical sections go, we do have a 2-lane roadway with 8-foot shoulders. Just to give you some context, we are widening that out to a 4-lane roadway with multimodal accommodations of pedestrians and sidewalks. There's our proposed typical section. The other one was the bridge section. So again, significantly wider. This project is needed again to reduce congestion, improve hydraulic resiliency in the corridor, support the growth and development in the area, again, provide that multimodal connectivity from north-south, and also to satisfy the agreements as part of cost sharing with adjacent development. Project is proposed to be split into phases. The current scope and fee in front of you, while the contract here for the resolution is for the entire 3 phases. The scope and fee is just for phase 1, which is the alternative analysis phase. This will be for alternative analysis to design the bridge and roadway that was shown in blue. So we'll be looking to identify costs, look at different hydraulic options in order to meet the goals of the project. So due to the complex nature of the Cache-la-Poudre River, we wanted to select a team that had extensive amounts of experience dealing with this. We'll be having to go through a lot of processes relating to that. So this alternative analysis phase is critical in order to identify the best option for the town. So we're proposing to look at anywhere between 4 and 6 options during this phase of the project. And then once a recommended option is determined and hydraulically, both physically and hydraulically viable, we'll be regrouping and kind of presenting on that as well. The next two phases are the just normal standard stuff, final design engineering, so preparation of contract plans, specifications, and estimates, followed into construction management services. Consultant selection process. Request for proposals was issued in April of 2024. We did receive 8 proposals, which were all deemed responsive by our procurement team. These proposals were analyzed by staff, which I believe all that information is also included in your packet. The top scoring firm, which was selected by all reviewers, was picked in order to move forward into scope and fee negotiations. That firm was the JUB team. They have extensive local experience working in Northern Colorado. They're a 500-person company with a Fort Collins office that was established in 2023. And we are excited to be working with them because of their extensive experience working with our partners like Fort Collins, Windsor, Larimer County, and Loveland, and also their extensive experience doing bridge design, specifically along the Cache Loop River. Finances. The cost for this project is $496,588 for the first work order. As you can see from our map, again, this is a big project. This phase includes survey, subsurface utility investigation, a public open house, council work sessions, in addition to all of the hydraulic analysis, preparation of all of those alternatives. That's all getting rolled into the phase 1. The funding source for this project was identified in the 2024 CIP as a part of the County Road 5, and a portion of this project will be reimbursed through our reimbursement agreements with adjacent developments. Schedule. If proceeded to move forward with it, we're looking at doing alternative analysis between July 2024 and December of 2024. This would mean that we'd be having a recommended alternative sometime this winter. That alternative, if approved to move forward, would proceed into phase 2, where we begin all the fun stuff of designing all the nitty-gritty, avoiding all the utilities, minimizing impacts. That process will take us into fall 2026 and looking at construction in 2026 and 2027. Questions?
Council questions? Thank you for that. The cost of phase 1 is being reimbursed. That's exclusively by the development to the west, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And we don't have anything in place that that'd be reimbursed by any of the other adjacent landowners, correct?
Not for design,
Okay.
for construction in a later phase, the portion to the north.
Portion to the north.
From Cornhusk to Harmony.
Gotcha. Okay. Because the current Timnath Parkway construction basically gets us to Cornhusk, is that?
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha. Appreciate that we got 8 people interested. I noticed that our budget is 500,000 and we negotiated just under that. Next time, should we have a $400,000 budget?
The original project that was identified in the CIP was smaller. I believe the agreement that was signed this past year after the budget was approved added the scope of this project. So it extended it from just being this bridge to all the way down to Whitesell. So
we got a deal.
yes. There will be more coming with phase 2 and phase 3 though.
Okay. All right. Very good. Council, any other questions? All right. Is there a motion to approve Resolution 56, Series 2024, a resolution approving the contract with JUB Engineers?
I move to approve resolution number 56, series 2024, a resolution approving the contract with JUB Engineers, Inc. for this County Road 5 bridge and widening project.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, council discussion. I'll just add that this particular contractor seems to have a lot of experience in the area, specifically with dealing with the pooter that none of the other folks had. So hopefully they'll be a real good partner, and I'll be supporting this. Any other comments? All right. If we get all those in favor of resolution number 56, series 2024, resolution approving the contract with JUB Engineers, Inc. for this County Road 5 bridge and widening project, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries 4-0. We will now move into a series of business items that include public hearing. Our process for these is I introduce the item, we get presentations by staff and the applicant. Following that, there's an opportunity for anyone who wish to comment on that specific item, has the opportunity to do so with a 3-minute time limit. Following public comment, we'll then do council questions and then move on as normal with a motion and then discussion. So I will call item 7A, resolution number 57, series 2024, a resolution approving the Timnath South minor subdivision. Ms. Graves, Principal Planner Graves.
Okay, this item is the Timnath South minor subdivision. The owner is Timnath Ranch Investments LLC, and the applicant is TB Group. This is a minor subdivision, which is a process that allows for the subdivision of land where there's no public right-of-way dedication, and the resulting subdivision consists of 6 or fewer lots. This minor subdivision is being processed somewhat in concert with the Timnath South third filing preliminary plat. This minor subdivision is considered a technical cleanup item and will be followed by a de-annexation application. The subdivision covers approximately 110 acres, split between 4 parcels here in blue. The area is bounded by East County Road 36 to the north, East County Road 32 east to the south, South County Road 5 to the west, and County Road 13 to the east. The property represents the southernmost part of the town's jurisdictional and growth management boundaries. The property includes areas zoned R2 single-family residential and RE estate residential, which both align with the comprehensive plan designations of rural residential and low-density residential. So the minor subdivision would subdivide the existing 4 parcels into 5 parcels. So key to this proposal is to create an approximately 70-acre tract, Tract A, south of Greeley Ditch number 2. And so this is intended for disconnection from the town and reintegration into Larimer County. Just a clarification, the disconnection is not what is before you today, but solely the division of land. The remaining parcels B through E located north of the ditch make up the remaining 40 acres, and those are included in Timnath South third filing preliminary plat. And so upon approval of that plat, the lot lines would supersede this plat north of the ditch. So the 4 parcels would be replaced. That would be outlot B, C, D, and E with these single family residential lots. A few other noteworthy items: the area south of the ditch is pretty difficult for the town to serve due to access and the need to extend sewer for development. Planning Commission did recommend approval by a vote of 5-0 at their June 18th meeting, and staff has reviewed this against our minor subdivision review criteria found in 2, 9, 10, 11 of the Land Use Code, and we are recommending approval of this application. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kristen for her presentation.
Is there a clicker? Or do you want me to just tell you? There's only 3, so. Okay. My name is Kristen Turner. I'm with TB Group, and thank you for giving us a few moments tonight to talk about the Timnath South Minor Subdivision. I've only got a couple of slides for you, so this will be very brief, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. So on the screen, you see a slide that looks very similar to one that Logan just showed you as well. Everything that you see in blue and green is part of the minor subdivision. Those create the extents of the minor subdivision. The division, the line that we have added between the blue and green essentially will create that one larger tract south of the ditch, tract A, and then north of the ditch, there are several outlots as well. As Logan mentioned, we were in the preliminary plat process. You guys all probably remember we were here not too long ago and had a sketch plan for the property approved. So we were in the middle of the preliminary plat process and realized we had some cleanup stuff on the site to do. So we paused that. We're processing the minor sub, and our next step would be to move back to completing the preliminary plat so we could bring that forward for you to evaluate. So everything that is part of what you saw in the sketch plan and what's proposed as part of the Timnath South subdivision is shown in blue there and will continue to remain as part of the Timnath South subdivision. The area that's shown in green that will become Tract A, should this be approved, has never been included as part of the Timnath South subdivision. It has always been just extra land that was included in our boundaries simply because of the shape of the parcels at the time that the property was purchased. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the disconnection application. We have not yet made a disconnection application. That will be next. This application is only for the minor sub, but my intent with sharing a little bit more with you is just to explain the whys behind why we are doing this. Can we go ahead and skip forward? There we go, perfect. Excuse me, I have a cough that hasn't quite gone away. It's sitting in my lungs and I'm trying very hard not to cough at you. Okay, so reasons for this minor subdivision. The intent of that property south of the ditch was always to remain in the county. There was an annexation that was done a long time ago. It was actually improperly done. There were no signatures from the property owners on the applications or the annexation petitions. So one of the things with this is that it'll take that property back, put it back into the county where it had always intended to be. All of the other adjacent properties south of the ditch are owned by the same property owner. They are currently in the county and they have no intention of annexing those into the town either. So it will make this whole area south of the ditch being cohesively aligned as county property. As Logan mentioned, services and connections to the land south of the ditch are very challenging. There are no road connections. You actually have to go all the way down to the south of the property to access. Emergency access is very challenging. So considering development through the town in this area is just something that has not been part of the discussion to date. There is an existing mining permit on the property that is south of the ditch, and I wanted to mention this because it is included in our narrative, and it also came up as part of our neighborhood meeting discussion. So there is an existing mining permit on the property. There has been no mining that has been done on the property for quite some time. If in the future they decided they wanted to do some mining, and they have talked about that, there are no plans for that, but they have talked about that in the past, of potentially doing some mining on the county property and conveying that over to the Timnath South subdivision to help with fill where required. Then they would go through all the proper channels. So they would have to get a new mining permit through the county. There would be notification for that. So all of the proper things that are required with any kind of mining permit would be handled at that time. time. But as I mentioned, it's not anything they have on their radar to do at this time, but it was part of the discussion at the neighborhood meeting. So I wanted to make sure that you had that background as well. Let's see here. I think we have one more slide and it really just takes us back to our bubbles. So again, everything that's in blue and north of the ditch, that will be part of the future Timnath South subdivision. And the request is for that tract A with this minor subdivision, creating that tract A so that we have the opportunity to move forward with submitting a disconnection application in the future. That is it from me, and unless you have any questions.
All right, thank you. I think our next step here is to receive any public comment. Do we have anyone that wishes to provide public comment? See none. I don't believe anyone has signed up. We can then move on to council questions. Sure, I'm happy to kick it off. There was discussion about there's no intent to develop on the other side of the ditch in anytime soon. In terms of our growth management area, our GMA, does it outline what is currently Tract A, or is there the potential for additional land south of there to be annexed into the city sometime, into the town sometime in the future?
That is the extent of the growth boundary.
Okay, so this little very inaccessible sliver of land, it would be the end of town regardless, right?
Correct.
It seems to me that regardless of whether or not disconnection were on the table, that it would probably still make sense to redivide these parcels from 4 into 5 just based on the geographic nature of that ditch. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yes, we agree with that. The ditch is a natural divider. One other additional component that I didn't mention earlier is that we have not put the Timnath South subdivision, which has not been approved yet, into any of the metro districts. And so this is also part of that cleanup item. We don't want the property that's south of the ditch to be included in any of the metro districts.
Because if you did, that would make disconnection more complicated if that happened, right?
Well, you wouldn't be permitted. They have to be separated. It also doesn't make sense to have property that's not part of the subdivision to be included in a metro district.
The questions I have.
I think I know the answer to this, but I just want to ask it anyway to get clarification. But I've always dreamt of there being a road that goes straight to County Road 5. But I think I've been told by more than numerous people that it probably, due to the restriction and the access there, it's probably not feasible. But do we ever see there being a connective road from, what is that? Would that be 3 Bell all the way down to County Road 5?
Yeah, so actually I was just bringing up the transportation master plan. So we looked at that. Some of the big issues with that is just the way the ground is, the topography. And also when we do the transportation plan, we do model based on what our development looks like, but also Windsor, other developments. So it would not be needed any other connection south, also because it's the end of our GMA 2 or planning boundaries.
And no one
So-
else is planning, Windsor
Yeah.
or Fort Collins isn't planning to build down in that area either. So
I
there's really
don't
no
know if I
need
can
for
answer that,
connectivity
but-
or.
The property that's south of the Timnath South subdivision is all owned by
it.
the same owners
Got
as Timnath South. It's all county property and they do not intend to develop through Windsor, Timnath.
Yep. Makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
That's it.
Logan, maybe I can ask a question on the staff review, where the review criteria. Can you help me understand number 2? And does this even apply in this? So it says the utility and transportation design is adequate given the existing and planned capacities of those systems. So I guess I'm just trying to resolve in my mind what the difference is. Like, there's no way we can get to it But am I understanding number two to say it kind of, are they in contradiction of each other, or can you help me resolve that of why some parts of this may not be completely accessible and then this one says it's going to be fine?
Yeah, since development is not proposed on tract A and it will eventually maybe be disconnected, it kind of nullifies that criteria. We don't really look at that criteria. But that criteria would apply to everything that's overlaid and included in the preliminary plat.
That's coming up, right?
That's coming up.
Okay.
So right now, they're designated as outlots. Outlots aren't developable. So once the preliminary plat comes in, it will supersede overlay those.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Then is there a motion to approve Resolution 57, Series 2024, a resolution approving the Timnath minor subdivision?
I move to approve resolution number 57, series 2024, a resolution approving the Timnath South minor subdivision.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, council discussion? Okay, I'll provide a little bit of commentary, as was already stated, that I think the issue of whether to allow this redivision of property makes sense, whether or not there's a disconnection and whether or not there's a potential mining operation. I do think that, you know, when we get to the question of disconnection, that there's probably some more questions that ought to be asked, but that as proposed, this would make sense to me, regardless of whether disconnection were part of the conversation. Any other comments? Very well, then all those in favor of Resolution 57, Series 2024, a resolution approving the Timnath South minor subdivision, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Once again, carries 4-0. Moving on to 7B, Ordinance 13, Series 2024, an ordinance adopting amendment number 16, Article 6, Article 10, and Article 12 of the Timnath Land Use Code. Principal Planner Graves.
Okay, this seems like familiar territory for us. So the following land use code amendments were items that were continued by council during the previous work sessions and council meeting and have been repackaged as land use code amendments 16. They were presented to Planning Commission on June 18th, and the commission recommended approval by a unanimous vote. So I'm going to go one by one, and perhaps we can just, do you want me to flow through all three of them, or shall I stop after each one for discussion? Okay. Okay. Awesome. So the first item addresses our circulation general requirements, specifying that all streets must be designed according to Loveland's version of Lucas standards by reference. So this code amendment clarifies these requirements by explicitly mentioning the Loveland version in section 662, thereby reducing ambiguity in the code language. The next series of amendments relate to our annexation procedures. So sections 10.2.9, 10.5, 110, 10.5.4, and 10.9.3.2 provide clarity that only owners of private property petitioning for annexation to the town enter into an annexation agreement. And then we have proposed a new section, 10.10, to address enclaves and state that the town has the authority to annex enclaves, which are defined as any unincorporated areas entirely contained within the boundaries of a municipality that has been surrounded for a period of not less than 3 years. So that concludes that section. And then the last code amendment is Article 12, oil and gas drilling and production. So since the passage of Senate Bill 19-181, The state has granted local governments the authority to enact more restrictive regulations than those set by the Energy and Carbon Management Commission. Council has requested staff to update our oil and gas regulations to be in alignment with our neighbors. And so the proposed code amendment primarily focuses on more restrictive zoning and setback standards for new oil and gas development. So the key updates are limiting oil and gas facilities as a conditional use to the agricultural and industrial zone districts. Currently, they are allowed in agricultural, estate residential, business, neighborhood commercial, community commercial, regional commercial, and industrial. Requiring a 2,000-foot setback from all building units. So currently we would defer to the state setback standards for building units. Requiring a 2,000-foot setback from areas where people may congregate outdoors, such as parks, trails, and natural areas. Include a waiver process for building units where a reduced setback is allowed if all building unit owners and tenants within the setback area provide explicit informed consent. We also included a residential waiver where the 2,000-foot setback can be reduced to 1,000 feet for residential building units if all affected owners and tenants within 2,000 feet provide explicit informed consent. And then we are requiring a neighborhood meeting for all oil and gas development and requiring mailed notice to be sent to property owners and tenants within that 2,000-foot radius of the proposed site. So the Planning Commission made two suggestions regarding Article 12. First, they recommended sending mailed notice to all property owners within the town. And second, they suggested that town council approve any waiver request for a reduced setback. Additionally, we received comments from the American Petroleum Institute, which were included in your packets, and we did not make any changes based on that feedback. And with that, I'll let you ask any questions.
Before we move to questions, I will open this for a public comment. I don't believe anyone has signed up. Is that correct, Ms. Peters Garcia? Okay, is anyone who didn't sign up wish to provide commentary? Yes, Ms. White.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council, town staff, members of the public. My name is Carolyn White, and I am here on behalf of the Ladera project. And we would like to share just a few comments about one particular component of the text amendment package. It's the very first item that staff described, 6.6.2A1. And as staff mentioned, this does feel familiar because we just had this conversation with you all a few months ago, the first time that this package was brought forward and included this requirement. And that's the requirement that all streets, including private streets, be constructed to Lucas standards. And at that time, we wrote you a letter explaining the reasons why we thought that wasn't an appropriate standard to incorporate into the land use code. And it was removed from the package that was approved and then deferred until a later time. So now we are back again, and that component is part of this package. We reiterate those concerns. We expressed them in a written letter that was sent to you on Friday, I believe, and hopefully has been included in your packet. And without sort of repeating everything that's in the letter, I just want to comment that there are certainly instances where it would be appropriate to construct streets not to Lucas standards, particularly when those streets are not going to be maintained by the town. Right? I mean, one of the key components of Lucas standards, for example, has to do with the street section, right? How wide the lanes are going to be, how wide the median's going to be, how wide the sidewalks and the curb and gutter are on either side. In certain types of developments, like the Ladera, where we're trying to design a very integrated live-work kind of place, there might be reasons where we would want the streets to be narrower and the sidewalks to be wider than what is provided for in Lucas. And in that case, in Ladera specifically, we are proposing to have those streets to be owned, operated, and maintained by our metropolitan district, knowing that it's not the town's desire to maintain streets that are not to the town's standards, among other things. things. And also to ensure that to the extent we're constructing streets that are different from the rest of the town and perhaps have additional maintenance obligations, that only those residents within that project are going to be paying for that maintenance. Of course, the town still has oversight over public safety and will approve and review and approve those street standards as they're proposed, as they come forward with each plat. But we don't think it's a good idea to require all streets, public or private, to meet the Lucas standard, because the Lucas standard was designed for a specific thing that doesn't apply in all cases. One size doesn't fit all here. As we suggested in the letter, what we'd like to propose that you do is just strike that one component from this text amendment package, move forward with your text amendment package, but understanding that the town may want to move forward with some version of clarifying and heightening the Lucas standards. What we proposed in our letter is perhaps you might just exclude that requirement from the RC, the Regional Commercial Zone District, which is the underlying zone district, not only in Ladera, but in your code, it's intended to represent that zone district where you are intending to create developments similar to Ladera, which incorporate sort of a multitude of uses that are integrated. And those are the most likely places where you're probably going to have situations where the developer wants to propose something different than the Lucas standards. So just as a fallback, I wanted to suggest that maybe that might be a way to meet halfway, where you could still create some flexibility for these types of innovative developments and still maintain the Lucas standards for the majority of streets in the town. So thanks for the opportunity to comment on that.
Thank you, Ms. White. And I know all of council received the letter. I didn't see it in the packet, but I would ask that it be included in the record. And then I also noticed, and it is in the packet, the API comment letter is already included, and I hope that all of council has had a chance to review that as well. Okay. Anyone else wish to comment on this item from the public? Okay. Then we will move on to council questions.
I have a question about the streets portion of this. And I know it says in here that the changed wording would have designed to the most recently adopted Timnath Design Criteria Manual and the Loveland version of the Larimer County Urban Street Standards. And I was hoping that you could give a very brief response, just in case anybody has not paid attention to the last couple meetings we've had, of why the Loveland version. And then I will just say one concern I have when we list multiple documents is that when we don't have control over all the documents, they may change it and it may be contradictory to another document. And that always brings up concerns for me when it's not our council looking at that. So I guess the question part first.
Yeah, so you kind of hit it the nail on the head there, because actually we're talking about many documents, 3 documents. So the document before you tonight is the land use code, which is talks about more land use, but they're interrelated. So all this is doing is referencing an existing what's called the Design Criteria Manual, which is a separate document that's been approved that covers that. So in there, it talks about that's where the standard requires that private and public streets have to meet the standards. And part of that, there is a waiver process too that could be done as we look at specific cases. So there is a way to look at, unique cases. But that's the thing, is we would have to go back, if we wanted to change it, we would have to go back and do the Design Criteria Manual. That's something we could look at. Or the other one, like you said, is the Larimer County Urban Area Street Standards and the Loveland specs, which really do not cover private roads. So this does what the Design Criteria Manual does do, is at least provide a baseline for when development comes in that we could look at and make sure, we're covered, especially in residential districts. That's where we find most of the issues with this. And I know of my previous, our work before in Loveland, all jurisdictions had. That's why now the requirement, that's why they had the requirement for, if you're going to take over a private street, it has to meet the standards, because a lot of the issues of a lot of streets were not built they use the private street as a way to get a variance around. And then as residents live there, it's not sometimes getting maintained, and then it becomes an issue for the town. So what this does is help us, like especially on those residential areas where that case is usually the issue, or in commercial areas like drive aisles, that's not the same issue. So it does, I think, looking at this, I think from my 30 years of experience, I think Timnath is actually in a better position than a lot of other jurisdictions because of this requirement, that we do have that waiver and that ability to do that. And I think, I don't want to answer for them, but also there's like the plan development overlay process too, where I think we could also look at the road sections and look at that. So I don't know, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I guess my concern would be listing out multiple documents in here, right? Like I think referring to our own document is very much appropriate, but then also having them have to follow other documents unless we're following whether those are updated, there just could be some discrepancies at some point where I would just suggest that we have them. I think putting in the Timnath design criteria manual is very much appropriate. I just worry a little bit about mentioning outside documents.
Yeah, looking at it, I think we'll look at that. We'll go back to the drawing board, but we could look at it. I think that would still cover our needs because the criteria manual then talks about that one. So at least then if we change that, we don't have to go back and change this one. So maybe you don't have to have 3 documents listed. So I think that could be doable, but we could go back and look at that. So I think that could be probably a minor amendment, but I'll defer to Carolyn on that.
Council, I'd just like to speak from like the land use coast perspective, and based on the last amendment we brought forward and in the memo and discussions, this is really just to clarify what the current policy is, to avoid the confusion in the land use code and perhaps the disconnect between what the town has been doing with the design criteria manual and the fact that we adopted the Loveland standards. My commitment again is that we're going to bring forward something to address the unique nature of commercial developments. Director Stone explained that there is a variance process with that. And I think the direction you gave staff was that the clarity for the private streets made much more sense for residential districts, and you would like some more flexibility for commercial. So we're still working on that. And my intent is to bring something forward in the future. I think what we proposed is appropriate given what policies and things we have in place. I try to avoid referencing documents that come out of date in the document, because then you have to go back and fix them. Hence the reference to the old 2021 land use code on our website. So that's something I'm mindful of. So I appreciate that. Thanks.
Go ahead. John.
Go ahead, Jeff. Yeah, so I think I'm hearing it that the biggest concern of all this is predominantly residential, not commercial. Am I correct with that on the street piece?
For my piece, it's just clarity on what the code.
Sure.
It's confusing if you look at it now.
Yep.
Because there's not a lot of clarity on which standard we're referencing. We have a prior document that was adopted in 2016. So I'm just making sure the land use code, if that's your point of entrance, that it's clear that this is what we're referencing.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But I guess more comment than anything, I think I'm probably more comfortable if it's still a work in progress, not moving forward with setting all streets that way. If we're still working on the commercial piece of it or the separation of both, just on that specific side of things until we kind of narrow it down. I like the fact that there's a waiver process. I mean, there is still the ability to be able to ask for it if that happens to go through. So there is still the opportunity to create some of those commercial areas that we desperately need, but that would be my 2 cents at this point.
So Ms. White brought up an alternative to this, maybe excluding, was it RC? Did I hear that correctly? So what's your thoughts on that? Why would you support it or not support it?
I mean, again, if that was a temporary fix and we came back, I'd probably recommend to take it out around version 3 if we were looking at our attempts at just trying to clarify what current policy is. I do think there's some challenges with commercial private streets and how staff reviews layouts, orientation of buildings, front entrances, drives, when there is no, all references are to public streets. And so the placement of buildings is very important when you start looking at walkability and access management. And I would agree with some of the comments about encouraging narrower streets, wider sidewalks, especially in commercial areas. So I think those are great comments that we can consider. But I think when we look at carving out just a district that would be exempt, we still have a standing policy in place that we have to follow the design criteria manual, and there's a process for those deviations or variances or what have you. And I would prefer that we would stick with that until we come up with a better way to clarify that than just writing off it. Because it doesn't, in my mind, it doesn't change anything. We're still defaulting to a variance process.
And so if we're concerned, let's just use the Ladera property as an example. Where would this waiver come into play? You know, we kind of look along that timeline that we have that was presented earlier. It's our construction time or our development timeline where it goes major, you know, all in that, the major, the minor subdivisions and all that. Where would this waiver come into play, and how soon would we see that as council, or when might, you know, how, I just want to make sure I get clarification of when that waiver would be in the process.
Does Justin? I believe it would happen during the plating process when we're reviewing those street cross sections. So if there is an alternative cross section to look at, we would consider them during that time and bring them to you.
So I just don't know as much as you guys. Like, is that in the front of the timeline? Is it in the back? Like, where would that be? So, you know, thinking about the commercial property for them as well, all the work they put in, but also all the work you guys put into that process. So I was just thinking, you know, is it all the way on the back end and we've got to go back and rework it at that time? Or is it going to be soon enough in your guys' process that if a waiver comes forward, it won't be setting us back 6 months, essentially?
Ideally, we would want them to come forward with it as they're designing the street cross sections. So as we're reviewing, you know, the circulation network in the development, that's when we would be discussing those waivers and then bring them to you during that process. That way we don't have to go back retroactively and change anything.
That's all the questions I have on this one. Do you get, but yeah, I have questions on the other items.
Go ahead. I've several as well. So.
Okay. When we talk about the slide where it says for the waiver for oil and gas, it says what does it say? Every building owner and every tenant? Is that correct? So if that were to happen over here in these apartments, does that mean every single tenant in the apartments over here would have to agree to that?
That is correct. That is how it's written.
Okay, perfect. Okay, that's my question.
I'll throw in a couple and then maybe let others ask some more questions. I'm looking at the proposed 10612 that deal with the annexation requirements. And I know that our intent here was to have the language exactly match the statute. And when this was before council last time, there was comment that we were not matching the statute. And due to that confusion, I think we pulled it. So I just want to make sure that we're comfortable that what is in here now is consistent with the statute.
That's correct. My understanding is it was always consistent, but it wasn't using the exact same language, which the concern was still by a public comment that it could lead to ambiguity. And now the language matches the language in the state statute.
Great. Thank you for making that change. Appreciate that. Looking at added section 10.10.1 dealing with enclaves. It talks about a 3-year period. Am I understanding this correctly, that essentially, if we don't act within 3 years, then we cannot force an enclave annexation? Is that what that's saying?
No, that's not correct. So in order to have unilateral annexation without the property owner's consent of an enclave, it must be an enclave within for at least 3 years. So from any point of that 3 years onward, it could be annexed.
Okay, so if, oh, I missed it, I lost it. Can you run me through that one more time? I'm sorry.
It needs to have been an enclave for 3 years or more.
Okay.
So I guess it is a double negative, but again, it's, I think, matching the statute. So it must have been entirely contained within the boundaries of the municipality for not less than 3 years. So from any time when it's been an enclave for 3 years or more, it can be annexed without the property owners petitioning and consenting to that annexation.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And so prior to that 3 years, if we really wanted annexed for some reason, we could approach them, ask them to submit an application, but we can't force it, at least under that reasoning. Okay. And then on, it's page 284 of the packet, dealing with table 2.1 and the conditional use review. I pulled up my copy of the land use code, and I'm just trying to understand what we've done here. Under 12.4.2, there are 2 check boxes, and then we added a 3rd check mark, a red check, which when I pulled that up seemed to be the spot for neighborhood meeting.
That is correct. I should have included that column. Mhm.
Okay, so your presentation confused me a little bit. Are we adopting Planning Commission's recommendation to require a public meeting? Is that what this checkbox is doing?
So we would like to require a neighborhood meeting for
neighborhood.
all oil and gas applications. Planning Commission's recommendation was on the mailed notice. Our recommendation was it for mailed notice to go to all property owners within 2,000 feet of the proposed oil and gas location, and they would like it to go to all landowners within the town.
All right, so I said we will require a neighborhood meeting for all oil and gas applications.
Correct.
And then our current standard, is it, if we adopt this, is it 500 feet, 2,000 feet, or all of town if for notice?
For notice, as it's written in here, specific to oil and gas would be, it's proposed at 2,000. But our conventional mail notice requirement is 500 for all other applications.
So the 2,000 would be an expansion of anything else we do anywhere. Okay. What was the staff thought process behind adopting 2,000 as opposed to leaving it at 500 or making it all of town?
The thought process was we included that waiver process to reduce the setback. And so we feel any property owner within that 2,000-foot setback is most impacted and kind of should be able to have some sort of vetting process with the application.
And we're most likely to see this in the case where they are looking for the exemption from the 2,000 to 1,000. Is that when we're most likely to see that?
Yeah, so yes. So mail notice would go out regardless of whether the operator wanted to reduce the setback.
Council, I'll turn it over to others with questions.
So on that mailer, regardless if it's 500, 2,000 or all, it's up to the operator to pay for the expense of sending that letter out, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. If that's the case and it's not extra cost to the town, I would tend to agree with planning commission on letting all residents know if it's not at our expense.
We do have other forms of notification. We do publish in the local newspaper. We do put it on our website. So we didn't want to be overly burdensome to the applicant to have to mail notice to every property owner in town, but that is a policy decision.
I just have an add-on question related to that. So the way it's worded is owners and tenants. How are they getting that information? Because obviously tenants would be at those addresses. Is there a means for them to get property owners that don't currently reside in those properties?
Yeah, we use Larimer County Assessor's site to find if, there's an absentee owner, it will list the owner's mailing address, and then it would go to the physical address.
Okay,
as well.
perfect. Thank you.
Along those lines, so just again, can you explain to me what explicit informed consent means in there? And then I just don't know if the question has been, or the recommendation by planning council to allow a waiver process. I don't know if we've decided, thoughts on that, but can you explain to me what explicit informed consent means in this case for every building owner?
Yeah, we would need to flesh that out a little more, but essentially we would have an application. There would be an agreed upon location of the oil and gas equipment, and that proposal would need to be sent to the property owners. They would need to understand, what is being applied for, and then be okay with the reduced setback.
Sorry, I'm not sure I follow. So when you say work through that, are you saying that we not sure how to apply this yet? Or there's a plan and process, kind of like we talked about the land use code is, so provide more I'm just not understanding.
Yeah, I think if this were to be approved, staff would come up with some sort of effective process for getting that informed consent. So we would work with Carolyn to figure out the best method and way of getting that informed consent and what that actually looks like.
Okay.
I would think in most cases that the applicant would probably be proposing something, for our review in terms of a consent, which would be a letter explaining what they intend to drill, what the current code requirement is, and then the request for a variance and for a reduction. And, that would be, so I think we would easily be able to, make a determination on staff level whether that was informed consent. But I think informed would just be explaining the situation, and consent would be an express written consent to the proposed reduction.
Okay, so again, using the apartments back here as the example of one person says no, does that mean the waiver's not granted?
Yeah, it's a very difficult waiver process.
Thank you. And then is that when the planning commission recommended that there be a waiver that would come to town council after that first waiver, I guess, here for building units? Is that what planning commission was recommending?
So Phil is here and he can chime in as well, but I believe that their thought process was, okay, let's say all tenants and property owners agree to the reduced setback. I believe Planning Commission wanted an extra layer of protection. And so they wanted it to go to before you guys to approve as well. So they would need informed consent and council approval for the waiver process. As it's written, if we get informed consent, staff can approve the reduced buffer administratively.
Okay. And then thinking about that in this waiver process, if we were to go with the waiver council, so if the waiver, one person says no, that's the end of as written right now. That's the end of the waiver process and they can't go any farther or come to council. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
Thank you.
I think I need to understand that too. So that last part, you had me all the way up to the last part. So if 1 out of 100 says no, it's shut down, but then it still comes to us and we can override it or we can't, right? There is,
No, it
No.
wouldn't go before you.
all right.
So
Yeah,
right
okay.
now,
I
there's
thought
nothing that comes to council.
nothing.
essentially.
Yeah, well, I think 100 out of 100 yeses still comes to council for final yes is what planning commission was proposing. Yes?
No?
Yes. Yeah.
I guess I'm confused. Can you explain, Logan? Sorry.
Yeah, I believe that was the feedback we received from Planning Commission is they wanted that extra layer. So it would, if 100% said okay, then it would then go to you guys and you guys would have to be okay with it. Is
Okay.
that correct, Phil?
Phil's shaking his head. No.
Yeah,
I
that's my
think-
understanding as well, what the direction and the recommendation was.
I think it's as it's written and the conversation was that if it's 100 out of 100, then I have the ability to approve it. And what I explained was, and this kind of goes back to the notification.
Sure.
If I heard any like complaints outside of the 2,000 and these weren't the 100 people that could vote on it, then I could kick it up to you. But I think the opinion of the plan commission was they prefer to kick it to town council. So that's kind of how I remember the conversation.
Thanks, Mayor, Council. Both of our recommendations were born of the circumstances of the obvious emphasis, much greater emphasis of late on transparency and also the sensitivity of oil and gas circumstances. On the noticing requirement, we simply thought, particularly because the developer bears that cost, that why not provide it to all residents on that one? Secondly, on the waiver, our intention, and I'm a little confused too about the 100% of residents. Our intention was simply if there was any, and again, in the interest of transparency, so it does come before the public, is if there were any waivers, that those would be approved at the council level so that there can be open discussion on them rather than perhaps have staff bear that burden or it be borne at during the planning process. That was our recommendation on the waiver circumstance.
Thank you for that clarification. Thanks. Other questions? I did want to ask on 12.7.1, it restricts oil and gas to industrial, agricultural, or a planned development district in which oil and gas facilities aren't allowed use. What is our reasoning for having that third one with the planned development districts? Do such districts currently exist? Are they things that we contemplate in the future?
I think it's just an extra allowance that if someone did come forward with a PD development and wanted to allow that use, they could do so with the PD process.
So we would still on the front end have to approve the PD with an allowed use of oil and gas, and then they would comply with the other setback requirements within that, unless they own all the land within the 2,000, and then they can probably get the waiver pretty easily, or at least get it before council, because they're not getting 100 residents, they're getting their own signature, right?
Correct. Mhm.
So I know I'm gonna beat this one down. I apologize. When will it come before council? As written now, and when will it come before council as recommended by the planning commission?
Like a application
Like
of,
a waiver.
a waiver. I believe, so they would have to apply, there's, the submittal requirements are outlined in the article. So they have to have a preliminary site analysis, a alternative location analysis. So town staff has to be on board with the location. It has to meet all of our criteria. Then there has to be a neighborhood meeting. And then I believe if there was a want or need for a reduced setback, I mean, it could go maybe concurrent with the conditional use approval if we get all of the informed consent beforehand. Or maybe, I would say probably concurrent with the conditional use would make the most sense.
So will the conditional use approvals always go before council?
Right now, yeah, that's a council approval process.
So again, residents, they want to go from 2,000 to 500 feet. Residents can say, I'm not doing this. Right now, stops there. No waiver to council as written.
No waiver,
I mean,
but
no waiver,
reduced setback.
no reduced setback.
But the conditional use would still come before you for the required setback.
Okay, thank you.
It looks like the conditional use goes to planning commission for a public hearing and then to town council for a public hearing.
Thank you. Thank you, Logan. Sorry.
And then I would just ask, we received a letter from API. You mentioned that town staff had reviewed those concerns and elected not to make any adjustments there. Any specific comments or rationale on that?
Yeah, so for the definitions, we only updated the commission to ECMC, so we didn't change any other definitions in the code. There was concern about emissions control equipment, and we feel that the conditional use process is the appropriate process for that, just to ensure that the location of that equipment makes sense given the context. An alternative location analysis process allows the operators and the town to determine how best to avoid impacts to a wide range of resources. So the 3-mile threshold is what our neighbors do. All of Larimer County, Fort Collins requires that 3-mile radius. And so that's the threshold we wanted to stick with. This requirement is limited to 1 mile for a single well. Setbacks. So the state, the whole point of the Senate bill was to expand the town's authority and require operators to comply with the most protective regulations. So the whole purpose of this is, I think, to be a little more restrictive. And then we will refer to Colorado Parks and Wildlife. All applications will go to them. So we feel that they'll be able to identify areas of sensitive wildlife habitat, and we would defer to them for their working definition of what that is.
Okay. Thank you for reviewing those and providing an explanation. Council, any additional questions before we move on? At this time, is there a motion to approve ordinance 13, series 2024, and ordinance adopting amendment 16, including Article 6, Article 10, and Article 12 of the Timnath Land Use Code? All right, well, I will make a motion then to adopt ordinance 13, series 2024, an ordinance adopting amendment number 16, Article 6, Article 10, and Article 12 of the Timnath Land Use Code. Does any member wish to second?
I'll second it.
Okay. And at this time, we can have discussion. I would note that, if there are hesitations about amendments or whatever, this is an appropriate time that through the discussion process, amendments could be proposed. So with that, I suppose, let's just open it up for general discussion and then we can determine if there's a need to propose any amendments.
Yeah, I'll start. I would first want to do the recommendations as proposed by the planning commission to those amendments. So I would definitely like to do those proposals. Excuse me, as kind of my commentary on this, and it's maybe not an amendment, excuse me, is the Lucas standards. And I would just want to support support our staff on this and say, I want us to be business friendly and I want us to do the right things. And I believe in these Lucas standards. I absolutely do. I just don't want it to be a hindrance or a cost prohibitive thing or one of those. So I am in support of that as written today. But I would just hope that, kind of to Scott, your point that we continue to work on it. We clearly defined and we are good partners in that process. I think I would appreciate that.
To add to that, I would, the wording, just having that the Loveland version and the Larimer County Urban Street Standards, like having that wording in there, I think we could take that out and just leave the Timnath design criteria manual, knowing that in that document it's reflected. That way, if that's a document that administratively you can update as needed or something like that, rather than having us have to review the land use code every time, I feel like it would be a little bit easier to be able to just review that document. So that would probably be one that I would also mention.
So in regards to that, we could certainly go back to saying the towns adopted Larimer County Urban Street Standards instead of the Loveland version. And I think that would still cover it because that is the version that has been adopted by the land use code. In terms of adopting another entity's code by reference, you do that very frequently, whether it's the International Fire Code, traffic standard traffic codes. So I don't have a lot of concern about the fact that you're adopting another entity's code by reference. And should the other entity amend it in a way you don't agree with, then you would modify it at that point to say, we're adopting it with this change. But actually, I think it's appropriate, and I think it's a fine change to go back to the town's adopted Larimer County Urban Street Standards. You would still need to, I think it's incorporated in your actual town code, so you'd need to adopt an updated version of Lucas if you wanted to do that.
I was going to say, so a question related to that then. So and I know, I think you mentioned working on that Timnath design criteria manual. Is that something that council then approves, or is that an administrative approval there? I'm just trying to take out steps if there's a way to, if something is updated, that it doesn't have to come back before us. If that's standards that we know we want to follow.
Yeah, so I do know, because I was, part of the team that did the last update to Lucas. So if it's just technical type stuff, that could be amended by the different staffs. But if it's a policy amendment, it would have to be kind of adopted by the different councils. But as far as I'd have to look, I'm still new here, so I'd have to look at the design criteria manual, how that was adopted. I would imagine that probably had to be adopted by, there was a resolution that was done in 2016. So we'd have to do some kind of a resolution to update it and stuff.
I was just trying to clear up some steps if it didn't need to have those extra steps.
Yeah.
I think just on that piece, I'm with Carolyn, and I think it's completely okay to have, that wording in there. I just would like, if there is amendments, and I mean, I'm not constantly keeping up to date on what Loveland changes or doesn't change. So as long as those amendments and changes to that we're adopting get brought to us, or, you know, however that comes about. So we're up to date on what those changes are. So we're not kind of sideswiped by something that we didn't want necessarily in there. And then I'll kind of echo with Luke. I mean, I think we are really wanting to work closely with our, you know, developers, commercial projects. I think the staff's, you know, the last thing I would think you guys would want to do is purposely try to hold something up just by passing a rule like this. So the fact that there are waivers and there are ways to get around it, as long as that isn't, you know, burdensome and set somebody back a year or, you know, thousands of dollars in order to do so, that process can be swift if need be. You know, that I'm in favor of it as long as those parameters. And obviously it sounds like you guys are working to make that even more formal and tweak that as well. So.
I certainly appreciate the comments, and I stated that that's something we're working on. I think the challenge that staff runs into, and this was the first thing I said when we brought this, is we need a baseline to base something upon. If we don't have a baseline, I actually think that creates more challenges and more rounds of discussions and revisions and trying to figure that out. So I think we agree with the desire to have a different standard for commercial areas and residential. And it's just having something to base those decisions on would be very helpful.
My thoughts are, I support the proposed changes to the land use code as recommended by staff. I appreciate the conversation about the Lucas standards, but I view this from a perspective of these are the current standards, and we are just trying to just reaffirm that, make it more clear, and that if we don't like the current standards, we want to drift from those, I think maybe a separate process is the time to do that. I do feel comfortable that if a developer were to come to us with something that doesn't comply with the standards but had good reasons and talked about how it's safe and whatnot, that our current process would allow for that to be considered. So I don't have a concern there. I agree with Ms. Steffel that we often adopt things by reference. And so I'm comfortable with that as it stands. I appreciate both of the Planning Commission's recommendations. I am always a proponent of transparency and inviting as many people to the conversation as possible. I do have hesitations, though, about a requirement that requires notification of every single person in the town. When we were a town of 650 people, that's probably a reasonable thing to require. You know, at some point we're going to be 30 or 40,000 and we will still have this requirement. I appreciate that the staff took this comment seriously and upped it to 2,000. We don't do 2,000 anywhere else. I know there's discussion about should we do enhanced notification elsewhere. I view 2,000 as a reasonable compromise. I also feel like, you know, should there be a controversial application in town, people will learn about it through other means in addition to the letter that goes to their mailbox. So I'm comfortable. I'm personally comfortable with the 2,000. In terms of should it come to council, I do like the idea of it coming to council. It sounds like what Director Robinson has proposed is that although it says he has the authority to grant it with the waiver, if there's any controversy, then he would pass it along. That's what I've heard. You know, if someone wanted to propose that it goes straight to council, I would not be opposed to that, but I also think that as it's written is reasonable. I also think that we're unlikely to see this exercised very often. We talked about getting 100 resident signatures. They're not going to try, right? It's going to be the case where they are, or maybe one other person are the property owners and they're coming to us. I would personally probably strike C under 12.7.1, allowing for the oil and gas in a PD district where it's an allowed use. My thought is that oil and gas is appropriate in industrial and agricultural, and that most of our planned development districts tend to be either residential or commercial in nature. And the whole reason we're adopting this is because we do have legitimate safety concerns about these operations being too close to critical population and other sensitive places. So if we were to amend it, I would suggest striking that. Any other comments from council? So moving forward, we have a couple of options. I can take the vote on, call the vote on the proposals as changed, or if there is any council member that wishes to propose any specific amendment, they could propose it. If seconded, then we could discuss that particular amendment. So at this time, I would ask, are there any proposed amendments?
I would propose amending the motion to exclude 12.7.1C, a planned development district in which oil and gas facilities are in allowed use.
Is there a second to strike C from 12.7.1.1?
Second.
Okay. Moved and seconded. So we are now specifically discussing the matter of whether or not to strike C from that. Any thoughts?
My thoughts are, I agree with you on your comments on what you said. I think industrial and agricultural is more than enough. I think it leaves us open for the what ifs. If we have that planned development district, I'd rather just keep it to those two and let it be what it is.
Any other comments on the proposed amendment? Okay. We are voting on the amendment specifically. All those in favor of striking C from 12.7.1.1, which reads, a planned development district in which oil and gas facilities are in allowed use. Those in favor of striking that signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Proposed amendment striking C passes. Are there any other proposed amendments at this time?
I propose to, let me go to the section. I'm trying to find the section with about the resident notifications.
12.4.2.
12.4.2, thank you. I'll find it here. So I would propose in 12.4.2 to change the language from 2,000-foot radius to all residents.
So the proposed amendment, I want to be clear, would be to have 12.4.2B read notice provision, all oil and gas facility conditional use applications shall be required to notify property owners within the town of Timnath. Would that suffice?
Yes, thank you.
And then strike the remainder of that clause?
Yes, sir.
Is there a second to that proposed amendment? Okay. We will then move on to discussion on the proposed amendment.
This is one I'm a little bit torn on. I know your point of when we had 600 residents, it's a little bit different sending something out town-wide as opposed to once we get larger. As someone who just ran for election and did a mailing, it can get a little pricey. Obviously, it's a little different when you're dealing with a big corporation or something, but I do think we have other means of notifying residents. And I do think that this tends to be a somewhat controversial issue when things like this come up. And I do think that community members very clearly hear about it. But at the same time, I do understand that if it's within 2,000 feet and it's a new property, it may only be one person. So that could limit what people hear about it. So I guess I'm just a little torn on what that would look like.
I guess maybe a little clarification too. Does it, I mean, I'm still in favor of informing all, if possible. Does this specifically state they have to mail, or is there other variations of informing that we can get it out, whether it be, posted on our website, social media? Is mailer because again, if people don't check their mailer, if they live in other residences, and they're not receiving it, there's still a way that they can, appeal to the masses. So, is it has to be a mailer?
And my understanding is the specific requirement of our noticing provisions is those individuals who must receive specific directed notice via mail.
Via mail, okay.
So yes, all the other options still exist out there, and certainly the town could choose to advertise that we've received this. Anyone with comment, please provide comment, I would imagine.
Okay.
I guess I'm in support, and the reason why I brought up the amendment is I want to get this out, and I want to reach all residents in a sense that some people don't have social media, some people don't have a newspaper, and I think this is a big enough issue that can have long-term lasting effects on our community, but potentially both positive and negative. So I view this as a way to make sure that every resident knows of these plans, both positive and negative, in all forms of communication. So that's why I propose that amendment. I think it's better long-term for the town to have this kind of communication and be as transparent as possible. We're able to get out, ice cream socials. We're able to get out a flyer about all the things we're going to do in the town event. I don't think it's necessarily burdensome. Is it above and beyond? Yes, but that's what I'm kind of expecting out of what we're doing today. So that's why I propose that amendment.
And I can clarify that it is notice, the required notice is mailed. It is for other development applications only to property owners of estates, rights, and interests in the subject property, not also to tenants. That the tenant requirement is specific to the oil and gas developments.
I already shared my thoughts, which is that 2,000 is a reasonable compromise. I would offer, if there is still this concern, do we find another number that isn't all of town? Do we say 5,000 feet, make it a mile? And again, I'm just looking down the road, the reasonableness and honestly, the bang for the buck, right? Of, are we informing that many more people with the mail when it's already kind of getting out there? So I offer that thought. I don't know if we'd consider something other than all of town, but.
Yeah, I'm the one who proposed it, but I just wanted to, if this council wants to find a middle path, a middle ground on it, I'll do it. I want as many people to be as informed as possible. So, yeah, I still stand by what I said, but if the rest of the council doesn't feel necessary, I would support something, say 5,000 feet.
I guess my 2 cents on that would be, it'd be easier to either keep it at the 2,000 or go to all versus trying to find something. I mean, what's the happy medium there? It's either, you get it to try to send it out to everyone, or, what if the one person that, we're trying to appeal is a mile 0.1 or whatever it may be. So, I think I'm in agreement with both of you though, if there's a happy median and we're getting it out and we find out down the road that there are still, this becomes a normal thing, which I don't think it will become a normal thing. And we're not appealing to everyone, we can always go back and adjust it to all down the road.
And I would just comment on that is it's not a normal thing, right?
Correct.
So asking these people to do it one time in my mind
Right.
is less burdensome than I'm going to do 40 around town. So.
Or having to go back and change it.
Yeah. So.
Gotcha.
And I am looking at Larimer County's, their notification is a minimum of half a mile, and I believe Fort Collins is 1 mile.
Then that's 1 mile radius from drill site proposed, correct?
That's correct. So that would include individuals within the county who were not within the town as well.
And other counties, potentially. Gotcha. I mean, I think I could be persuaded at that 1 mile if it's sufficient, because I think depending on where they place that, it's going to get most places and most people.
So the current proposal is to amend and strike out "and tenants a minimum of 2,000 feet from the proposed oil and gas location for all," and I think it would end there, and replace that with the phrase "within the town of Timnath." So I can call the question on that, or we could entertain an amendment to the amendment, basically changing 2,000 to 5,000. Is there any request to amend the amendment? I hear none, so we will now vote on the amendment to, as read, require notice to all property owners and tenants within the town of Timnath. All those in favor of this amendment signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The amendment carries 3-1. All right. Any other requests for amendments at this time?
Just to clarify, Mr. Mayor, were you the nay vote on the last vote?
Well, it is 3-1.
And can you clarify who was the nay?
Oh, it was me.
Thank you.
Okay. I see no further requests for amendments, so we now return to the main question, which is whether or not to
So, Mr. Mayor, are we at the point where we talk about an amendment for town council should approve any waiver requests for a reduced setback? Or are we coming back to that?
No, I was going to call the question on the entire ordinance. So if there is a proposal for an additional amendment now, it would be proper.
Okay. Sorry, I lost my place here. I do want to call an amendment. Let me find the section here. Sent back. Do you know what section, Carolyn? I'm sorry.
12.7.1.2.B.
1.1
Page 17.
and 17. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so this is point B. So I guess my, go back, sorry, to, I guess I would like to amend 12.7.12B to amend that all existing building unit owners and tenants of any of the affected residential properties within 2,000 feet of the relevant point of measurement explicitly agree with the informed consent to the proposed oil and gas. And then adding to that, is that right? Adding back to the waiver, that the additional waiver should come through council, the setback waiver. Is that right, Carolyn?
You could add at the end of that section 1, and town council has approved a reduction in the setback via resolution.
Okay, so in section 1 there, and town council has approved the setback waiver.
Setback waiver via resolution. Okay. So the proposed amendment is to add to the sentence, and town council has approved the setback waiver via resolution. Is there a second to the proposed amendment?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on the proposed amendment?
I think we've all talked about it, but I'll just reiterate. I do like the idea of making sure that there's another level of transparency in this, that we're taking it seriously, that town council's trying to get this out in front of as many people as possible, and getting this in front of council, I think would give residents another opportunity to come forward and express their opinions if we cannot hear them during, in that, with the explicit consent. So I would like to give residents another opportunity.
I'm fine bringing it to council. Okay. All those in favor of the proposed amendment to add, and council has approved the setback waiver via resolution to section 12-7-1-2B1, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the proposed amendment passes. Before I call the question, call the vote, are there any other proposed amendments? Okay. Very well. Then at this time, I will ask Ms. Peters Garcia to take a roll call vote on proposed ordinance as amended, ordinance 13, series 2024, and ordinance adopting amendment number 16, article 6, article 10, and article 12 of the Timnath Land Use Code. Ms. Peters Garcia.
Yes. Councilmember Lisa Lake,
Yes.
Councilmember Jeremy Holt,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Luke Wagner,
Yes.
Mayor Robert Oxmacher.
Yes. All right. The proposed ordinance as amended passes. Council, we have amended the agenda to remove 8A. Any other items that we've missed? We stand adjourned.
Oh.